telling this 2 years after it happened because I still haven't found a version of my life that fits over it. I was 42 then. I had already spent years doing work that put me alone at odd hours, overnight deliveries, relief shifts at roadside places, one winter driving medical samples between towns because nobody else wanted the route after midnight. Night work teaches you what can be ignored and what can't. It also teaches you how easily a lit place can feel safe when it isn't. The part that bothers people when I tell them the little I tell them is that it started on a normal night. And that's true, worse than true. It started with a quiet kitchen and the kind of routine that makes you think the world is still arranged the same way it was yesterday. I remember rinsing my coffee mug before I left for the shift because I hated coming home to a sink that smelled stale. The apartment was small. One window over the sink, radiator clicking now and then, a dish towel hanging crooked because one corner had torn months before and I never replaced it. I had eggs in a pan, one piece of toast, a banana going soft on the counter. The weather had been wet all day, not heavy rain, just enough that everything outside looked rubbed with dirty water. My work shirt hung on the back of a chair, keys on the table, wallet under them, phone charging beside a stack of unopened mail. I lived alone by then. That made nights easier in a practical way. No one woke up when I came in at 6. No one asked why I smelled like coffee, bleach, and gasoline. I had taken the gas station job because it was steady and because the owner knew me from another place. Small station off a state road, open all night, not much traffic after 1 unless weather turned bad or somebody missed the larger stop 5 miles west. I did 3 nights a week and some extra when the younger guy called out. It wasn't hard work if nothing happened. Wiping counters, stocking the coolers, logging cigarette cartons, making coffee, counting the drawer, keeping the bathrooms from turning into something you'd be ashamed to let a stranger see. I ate standing up. I always did before a night shift because sitting down made me late. I checked the batteries in the little flashlight I kept in my jacket pocket. That was habit from older jobs. I remember that because I changed one battery and dropped the dead one, and it rolled under the table. I didn't bother fishing it out. I put on the work shirt, then the jacket, then turned the kitchen light off and stood there a second listening to the apartment settle. Fridge humming. A car outside hitting shallow water. Somebody on the floor above me moving a chair. Nothing felt wrong, not even close. I locked up, went down the stairs, and drove with the window cracked because the windshield wanted to fog. The roads were shiny and empty in that thin way they get after midnight, when every headlight seems farther away than it is. I stopped at a red light with no cars around and looked at my face in the rearview mirror. Tired, but ordinary tired. A man going to work. The station sat alone enough that the dark around it always looked a little thicker than the dark on the road. 4 pumps, a low building with a flat roof, big front windows, glass door with a bell that was too cheerful for the hour. Off to the side there was room for 4 cars to angle park near the building, and beyond the pumps the black space opened toward brush and a drainage ditch. Behind the building was a chain-link fence in some places, nothing in others. The owner talked about fixing that every month and never did. Inside, you had the counter and register, the coffee machines, shelves of snacks, a short corridor to the bathrooms, the supply room at the end, and a metal door near the back that hid the electrical panel and the water heater. There were cameras, technically. One pointed at the register, one at the front door, one that was supposed to catch the pumps but hadn't held its angle in forever. The monitor behind the counter flickered lines through the picture. The panic button under the counter was there too. The owner said it worked. I never tested it. I unlocked the front, turned the sign fully on, and did the first walkthrough. Wet mat near the entrance, lemon cleaner from the mopped floor mixing with old coffee and gasoline every time the door shifted in its frame. The overnight cashier before me had left sugar packets spilled beside the coffee lids. A stack of scratch tickets sat crooked. I straightened it, because that's the kind of thing you do when the night hasn't started yet and your hands want tasks. There was a little peace in that. That's why I stayed with night work as long as I did. The world was smaller. One counter, one parking lot, one bell on the door deciding when you had to pay attention. I had just poured the first stale pot out and started a new one when the bell rang behind me. There are people who come to the same station often enough that you stop seeing them as customers and start seeing them as part of the furniture of the shift. Truckers with the same coffee order, a woman in scrubs who bought mint gum at 4:10 every Thursday, a kid from the auto shop who always paid in quarters and smelled like transmission fluid. This man had that kind of familiarity around him, except I couldn't place him. Mid-40s, maybe older, wet dark jacket, work boots with mud dried up the sides, ball cap with no logo I can remember. His face was the kind you'd forget until it was standing too still under fluorescent lights. He came in a little after 12:30. I know that because I had just printed the first tobacco report and laid it by the register. He walked past the chip rack slowly, not looking at the shelf, more looking through the window toward the parking lot, as if checking whether someone had pulled in behind him. Then he stopped at the counter without putting anything down. Evening. My voice sounded normal to me. That matters. I wanted clear that I was not scared yet. Alert, maybe, because of the hour, but not scared.
You're Michael, right?
He said my name with no hesitation, like he had practiced the timing of it. There was a name tag on my shirt. That is the rational answer, I know that. But he didn't look at my chest first. He looked at my face, then said it. Yeah.
Thought so.
He kept smiling, but only with his mouth. Water dripped from the bill of his cap onto the floor tile. Need something?
Need a few things. Cigarettes first. Red pack, not the 100.
I turned to the wall behind me, found the pack, scanned it. That should have been that. Small talk, total, receipt, next thing. Instead, he left the cigarettes on the counter, unopened, and asked very casually,
You here alone tonight?
There's a way people ask harmless questions in places like that. They glance around, they ask because they're filling silence. He didn't ask like that. He asked as if the answer would settle something for him. I laughed once through my nose, trying to make it ordinary. Depends what you mean by alone.
Just you in the building.
He said building, not store. I told myself not to get dramatic over a word. Night work makes you hear too much in nothing. Plenty of people ask stupid questions because they're tired, drunk, lonely, or just built wrong socially. I dealt with all four, so I shrugged. For now. That was also true. Sometimes the owner's nephew stopped by around 1 with paperwork. Sometimes a cop came in for coffee. Sometimes nobody came for an hour. I didn't like giving straight answers to strangers at night, but I also didn't want to provoke anything over a sentence. He nodded like I had confirmed an appointment.
Quiet out here.
Usually is.
That can be bad.
I slid the cigarettes toward him and told him the total. He paid in exact bills from a wallet already open in his hand. No fumbling, no extra movement. He never looked down. The bell on the microwave keypad chirped because I had forgotten to clear it, and both of us flinched a little at the sound. He glanced over my shoulder toward the short hallway.
Bathroom still open?
Yeah, Down the hall, left side.
Good. Might need a minute.
He picked up the cigarettes and walked toward the bathrooms with the same unhurried pace. I watched him in the mirror above the coffee machine until he disappeared at the turn. Then I looked at the door and the pumps and told myself again that people are weird. That's all. People are weird, and at 1 a.m, your mind wants shape where there isn't any. I went back to stacking creamer cups. I could hear the fluorescent hum, the warmer under the hot dogs clicking once every so often, the faint hiss of fresh coffee dripping into the pot. Through the glass, I saw an empty road and the dark gaps behind the pump columns where the overhead lights didn't quite reach. 2 minutes passed, maybe 3, I am not sure. No toilet flushed, no sink ran. I stepped to the hall entrance and listened. Nothing. I told myself maybe he was sick in there, maybe on the phone, maybe just one of those people who hide in a public bathroom because they don't want to go home yet. That happens more than you'd think. "You okay back there?" My voice went down the corridor and flattened against the tile. No answer. That was the first real shift in me. Not fear, irritation with a hard edge under it. I walked halfway down the corridor. The left bathroom door was open, light on, empty. The right one too. No man, no jacket, no boots. Just damp footprints on the tile that went in and then seemed to blur into the dirty shine of the floor near the supply room door. I stood there, listening to the soft electrical buzz from the metal cabinet beside the mop sink. The supply room door was shut. It was supposed to stay shut. I kept the key for it in the ring in my right pocket. I put a hand on that pocket. The key ring was gone. It is embarrassing, after something like this, how long you keep trying to make it fit a harmless explanation. I did that for several minutes because the harmless explanations were all I had between me and panic. Maybe I had left the key in the stockroom earlier. Maybe the man had asked for the bathroom and I had turned away and missed him walking back past me. Maybe the footprints were from another customer. Maybe he was outside smoking under the overhang. I went back to the counter fast, trying not to look like I was hurrying even though no one was there to see it. The front door was still closed. The parking lot looked empty except for my car and an older sedan at Pump 3 that I had somehow not noticed arrive. I don't know when it got there. That part I'm not sure about. I remember its headlights were off, and its body was dark enough to blend into the wet black behind the pump. I checked under the counter, beside the receipt printer, around the sink. No keyring. I looked at the camera monitor. Front door feed, register feed. The pump camera was angled wrong, showing mostly a strip of concrete and one column. Lines crawled through the picture. The hallway wasn't covered at all. The owner had meant to add one. He never did. That was when I should have called the police. I know that now. But I was a man alone on a night shift with nothing solid to say. Strange customer knew my name, asked if I was alone, walked toward the bathrooms. Now I couldn't find him and my key ring was missing. Even in my own head, it sounded thin, like fear trying to dress itself as evidence. I picked up the store phone, then put it down again. If I call somebody for every creep who comes through, they'll stop taking me seriously. That was what I said out loud. I said it to steady myself. It had the opposite effect. I grabbed the small flashlight from my jacket pocket and clicked it on. Weak, but working. I had 1 bar of cell signal inside that building on a good night. If the power ever went out, the back half of the station turned into a box of corners and reflective surfaces. I went to the hallway again and pushed the supply room handle. Locked. That made no sense if my key was gone, because the last time I had opened it was at the start of the shift to check cleaning stock, and I remembered locking it afterward. If the man had my key, why was the door locked? Unless I had dropped the key in there, unless there was another key, unless I was already making myself stupid. Then I heard what sounded like a shoe sole moving on wet concrete just outside the back wall. Not loud, just a drag and a stop. I held the flashlight still and listened hard enough that my jaw hurt. Another step, closer to the area where the electrical cabinet sat, behind that metal door near the mop sink. The cabinet could be opened from inside, but the outside access panel was behind the building. We had had service calls there before. You could shut power to half the store if you knew what you were doing. The owner told me that once with the casual confidence of a man who assumed everyone else also knew how many weak points a building had. I backed out of the hall and returned to the front, because suddenly the most important thing in the world was keeping the glass door in sight. The bell rang. A young couple came in, wet hair, laughing too loudly, smelling like rain and fries from somewhere else. They wanted energy drinks and windshield wipes. I have never been so relieved to ring up $6 worth of junk in my life. My hands still worked. My voice still sounded normal. Need a bag?
No, we're good.
I nearly told them to stay. Nearly told them some stranger was around the building and I didn't want to be alone. But that sounds insane when there's no body to point to, no broken glass, no threat you can name. Social shame is a stupid thing to feel when you're scared, but it is real. I didn't want to be the middle-aged cashier inventing danger because the night was too quiet. They left. Their taillights washed red over the pump columns, and then were gone. The sedan at pump 3 was no longer there. I stared at the space where it had been until I realized what exactly bothered me. Nobody had paid for gas. Nobody had come inside. The pump screen outside was dark. This should have been a record if someone used it. There was none. That was the negative proof that broke the last easy explanation in me. Something had occupied that space without needing to buy anything. I locked the front door. It was against policy unless there was an emergency, but I did it anyway. Just turned the bolt under the handle and stepped back. My own reflection looked strange in the glass. Too pale, too flat. Then, the lights went out in the back half of the store. Not the front fluorescence over the register, not the canopy over the pumps, just the hall, the bathrooms, the supply room end, all gone at once. The bright rectangle of the store cut off sharply into black at the corridor entrance. That was the moment the place stopped feeling like a business and became a container.
Michael.
The voice came from somewhere beyond the dark hall. Not loud, not rushed, almost conversational.
You dropped something.
Something metallic hit tile and spun once. I didn't go to the hall. I want that clear. I was scared by then, in a clean, physical way. My skin had gone cold under my shirt, and the backs of my knees felt watery. I stayed behind the counter because it was the only structure in the room that gave me any illusion of being less exposed. The keys lay just visible at the border where the hallway light should have been and wasn't, reflecting the weak front fluorescence. I could see my flashlight on the counter beside my hand. I could see the phone. I could see the locked front door, and beyond it, the pumps and the dark wedges between them. I could not see the man. "What do you want?" My own voice sounded wrong, thinner than before.
Need a hand with something in back.
There was a pause after "in back" that felt intentional, like he was listening to how the words landed. "I'm calling the police."
For what?
That was the first time I understood how trapped social logic can make you. For what? For a man who bought cigarettes? for a voice in a dark hallway, for keys on a tile floor. All of it real, none of it enough. I picked up the phone anyway. No dial tone. I looked down at the cord first, stupidly, as though it had fallen out. It hadn't. The line was just dead.
You should unlock the door,
Why?
in case somebody needs help.
I remember swallowing and hearing it. My mouth was that dry. Then I heard another sound, somewhere outside the front glass. A soft tap, not on the main door, on the side window near the candy display. I turned so fast the flashlight rolled off the counter. Nothing was there that I could see, only the reflection of the bright interior and the rain-slick parking lot beyond it. But the tap came again, farther left this time, as if someone was moving along the windows toward the blind space beside the ice freezer. That was the hole I had tried not to look into all night, the possibility that he was not alone. "I'm warning you." I said it like I had authority. I had a dead phone, a weak flashlight, and a locked door that was mostly glass.
Are you alone, Michael?
He asked it so calmly that I finally understood the structure of what was happening. He had not come in to buy cigarettes. He had come in to find out how long I could be moved around inside that space before I did the moving for him. The question about being alone wasn't curiosity, it was measurement. And then the thought came, very plain, colder than the fear itself. He didn't want to talk. He wanted me looking in the wrong direction. The candy rack by the front window shifted, just a little. A bag fell and slid across the floor. I spun toward the glass again and saw for less than a second a shape pass between my reflection and the pump lights outside. Human height, hood or cap low, gone before my eyes settled on it. My hand went under the counter for the panic button. Nothing happened. I pressed again, harder, holding it down until my thumb hurt. Still nothing. That was the full collapse of every fake layer of safety the place had. Camera monitor useless, phone dead, button maybe never connected, front door glass, dark hallway behind me, unknown person, maybe persons outside in the blind angles.
Michael?
Closer this time, from the hallway mouth, not the back. I looked up and saw just enough of him to know he had moved into the edge of the light without me hearing him. One shoulder, side of his face, the wet bill of the cap. He had placed himself exactly where he could watch the counter and the front door at the same time. That was my moment of recognition. He was between me and the safe path, not because he had drifted there, because he had chosen it. Stay where you are.
Why?
He almost smiled again. Because I'm serious.
No, you're not.
What happened next took maybe 30 seconds. It lives in me as longer because fear stretches small things until they have rooms inside them. He stepped fully out of the hall, and I saw that he was holding nothing obvious in his hands. That frightened me more, not less. Empty hands at close range in a place full of edges and blind spots means you've already accounted for what the other person might reach for. I grabbed the flashlight and threw it hard without aiming. It hit the cigarette display instead of him. He flinched on instinct. That gave me one narrow opening. I came around the end of the counter toward the coffee island, thinking not strategy, not plan, just front door, front door, front door. At that exact second, the side window took a heavy hit from outside. Not enough to break, enough to turn my whole body toward it. That stole the step I needed. The man from the hall moved left and caught the shoulder of my jacket. I went down against the edge of the coffee station hard enough that all the air left me. Cups fell. Hot coffee splashed my hand. I remembered the burn and the smell more clearly than the pain in my ribs.
Easy.
That word, easy, close to my ear, is still worse to me than shouting would have been. I drove backward on panic more than strength, heels slipping in spilled coffee, palms smearing through sugar packets and creamer. My fingers hit a metal stir-stick canister, and then the whole cheap display stand toppled into him. Useless weapon, lucky obstruction. He checked his face with one arm, and I twisted away. The front door did not open because I had locked it. That detail will stay with me until I die. My own hand shaking on the bolt because in the moment I could not make thumb and forefinger do what they had done 100 times. Behind me, I heard shoes on tile and another impact on the window to my right. For one animal second, I knew with total certainty I was going to die in a convenience store because I had tried to be sensible about a stranger. Then, white headlights swept across the pumps and through the glass. A pickup turned in fast, too fast for the lot, beams cutting across the whole front of the station. Every shadow outside snapped backward. The man behind me stopped moving. I got the bolt free, shoved the door, and stumbled out into wet air. I didn't run like in films. I slipped, caught myself on the frame, nearly went to one knee on the wet concrete, and then lurched into the light from the pickup with one hand up. The driver, a guy maybe 20, maybe younger, braked so hard I heard loose tools hit around in his bed. "Help me." That is what I said. Not anything clever, not police, not call someone, just help me. The kid stared through the windshield for half a second too long, trying to understand why a middle-aged gas station cashier was standing in rain with coffee on his shirt and terror all over his face. Then he opened his door.
What happened?
"There's somebody in there, or around it. I need your phone." He handed it to me without arguing. I dialed with wet fingers and nearly dropped it. This time I got a connection.
911, what is your emergency?
I gave the address twice because the first time my voice came out wrong. I said there was a man inside the station, maybe two, I wasn't sure. Power cut in the back, possible attempted robbery or assault. Even then I heard myself editing, trying to sound like someone who would be believed. The kid had stepped out fully by then. He looked toward the front windows.
I don't see anybody.
I didn't either. The front door hung half open behind me, bright interior visible all the way to the counter. No man at the hall, no shadow crossing, no figure at the window, just overturned cups, sugar all over the floor, the flashlight under the gum rack, and my keys lying near the corridor entrance.
Stay on the line. Are you in immediate danger now?
I don't know. That was the truest thing I said. The kid wanted to go inside with me and look. I told him no with more force than I meant to. We stayed by the pickup, its headlights washing the building so flat that every dark gap looked deliberate. That was the worst part of waiting for the police, seeing how many places a person could crouch without being seen from where we stood. Behind the ice freezer, beyond pump 4, along the sidewall where the dumpster blocked half the view, behind any car that pulled in. The whole lot was built out of angles that pretended to be open. The first deputy came in maybe 8 minutes later, maybe 10. Time was bad in me then. He cleared the building with another unit. They found no one. The back half power had been cut at the external service switch behind the station, not storm damage, manual. One of them asked who else had keys. Owner, nephew, service company, maybe old employees if the locks had never been changed. The owner swore later they had been changed. I never saw paperwork on it. They checked the outside and found wet prints near the electrical access and along the sidewall, but nothing clear enough to cast. Rain had blurred everything. The camera at the front door caught the man entering. It did not catch him leaving. The pump camera showed the dark sedan roll into view and stop short of pump 3. Then lines tore through the image for 17 seconds. Then the space was empty. The deputy replayed that section twice in front of me. 17 seconds of interference was all it took to erase whatever happened there. The cigarettes the man bought were gone. So was one carton from the locked tobacco cabinet behind the counter. I did not hear it being taken. I still don't know when it happened. Maybe while I was looking at the window. Maybe before the lights cut. Maybe there had been enough time inside my fear for 3 or 4 other actions I never registered. The owner came in wild with anger, mostly at the idea of liability, though he dressed it up as concern. He kept saying robbery because robbery sounded simpler than what I was describing. Simpler, cleaner, insurable. One deputy asked me to walk them through the sequence again, and I did, standing near the coffee station where the floor was still sticky under my shoes. When I got to the part where the man said my name, the deputy looked at my shirt and pointed to the name tag. I understood the logic. I'm not offended by it, but something in me shut down right there. Because that was how the whole thing would go from then on. Every specific would have an ordinary answer available. Name tag, dead phone line from weather, panic button maybe not connected, man asked odd questions, cut power, tried to scare the cashier, stole cigarettes, ran. Another person outside maybe imagined in the stress. Maybe there never was another person. Maybe there was. That is the part I still cannot settle honestly. I finished the shift paperwork because the owner wanted documentation before he let me go home. I did it with a deputy still in the lot. That should tell you something about the kind of place it was. I wrote slower than usual because my hand would not stop shaking when I tried to make numbers. On the incident form, under Summary, I wrote, Suspicious male customer entered store. Possible accomplice outside. Back power manually disconnected. Attempted assault. Theft. Possible accomplice. That was the official shape of it. I drove home after dawn and parked facing the street instead of backing in. I had never cared how I parked before. I never worked another night shift after that week. I told people it was my age, my back, the sleep cycle, and all of that was partly true. But the real thing was simpler. I could not stand inside a lit place surrounded by darkness and trust the light anymore. My rule now is stupidly specific, which is how you know a rule was born from fear. I do not stop at isolated gas stations after 11 unless I can see another customer already there and at least one employee not alone. If I have to stop, I park nose out, close to the entrance, never beside a van, never beside a car with dark rear glass. I look for the line of sight to the counter before I cut the engine. I do not enter if I cannot see the clerk immediately. I keep my keys in my hand, not pocket, hand. My wife once asked why I held them like a blade walking into a brightly lit pharmacy, and I told her it was habit. That was easier than the truth. I still wake up sometimes hearing the dead calm in his voice when he asked if I was alone. Not angry, not drunk, not excited, just patient. Patient in a way that suggested he had done some version of that before, enough to know which question moved a person's attention where he wanted it. People ask whether I think he meant to rob me or kill me. I don't know. That's not me being dramatic. I honestly don't know. There are versions where it was a crude theft and I panicked at the right time. There are versions where the point was never the cigarettes or the carton behind the counter. There are versions where there were 2 men, and versions where there was 1 man using my own fear, the windows, and the layout of that station to make himself feel like more than one. I can tell you what changed in practical terms. I quit within a month. I changed routes when I drove at night. I stopped taking jobs that put me alone with a public-facing counter. If a building has a narrow back corridor and a blind service area, I note it automatically. I count exits without meaning to. I do not like hearing a doorbell behind me in any convenience store. Even now, even in daylight, my shoulders tighten before I turn. The police never found him. No arrest came of it. The owner replaced the phone line, supposedly wired the panic button correctly, and added one more camera pointed at the hallway mouth. He told me that like it should have made me feel better. For years, I thought the part that froze my blood most was the service switch outside, because that proved intent. Nobody kills half the lights at a gas station by accident. But that wasn't actually the worst piece. The worst piece came later, and it was small enough that I almost missed it. 2 days after the incident, I went back in daylight to empty my locker. The station smelled the same as always: burnt coffee, cleaner, old fryer grease from the hot snacks, gasoline when the door opened. Everything looked reduced in the sun, as if night had exaggerated it on purpose. I went to the back for my jacket, and while I was in the supply room, I noticed the maintenance log hanging on a clipboard by the electrical cabinet. I had seen it many times before and never read more than the dates. There was a note from 3 weeks earlier, written by the service company after a routine inspection. I remember the wording almost exactly because I stood there with my hand on the paper for a long time after I read it. Exterior service switch safety cover missing. Temporary tie applied. Replace immediately. I stepped outside and walked around the back of the building to where the switch box sat. The cheap plastic cover that should have been screwed shut was there that day, new and clean. I asked the owner when he fixed it. He said, after the incident. What made my stomach go cold was not that the switch had been accessible. It was what I found when I went back inside and looked beneath the mop sink, where odds and ends got kicked and forgotten. Tucked behind a half-used bottle of floor cleaner was the old safety cover, dirty and rain-stained, with its screws still taped to be inside in a little paper packet. It had been removed carefully. Not broken, not lost, removed and kept. I don't know by whom. I don't know when. I don't know whether the man who said my name had done it on an earlier night, or whether someone else had made the station easy long before he walked in. I only know that when I think back to him standing where the hall met the light, I no longer believe he was improvising. And the detail that still wakes me is this: if he had been testing the place in advance, then the first time I ever noticed him was probably not the first time he had noticed me.